All right, so you know how everyone's always talking about player agency in RPGs these days?
Mm.
It really makes you wonder, like, how much power should players actually have in shaping a game's story? I
Mm.
mean, it's this constant back and forth, between what the players want to do and the world the DM has spent so much time crafting.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating dynamic for sure.
it is.
And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially after this one crazy campaign I played in a while back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were exploring this abandoned wizard's tower, right? Totally classic D&D setup.
Mm.
And out of nowhere, one of the players decides their character is like obsessed with restoring it to its former glory.
Huh.
Like none of us saw it coming. The DM definitely didn't have it planned. But you know what? He just rolled with it like a total pro.
Wow.
Yeah, we ended up spending the next few sessions gathering like rare materials and deciphering these ancient architectural diagrams. We even recruited this quirky gnome architect to help us out.
That's awesome.
It was wild. And it totally derailed the main quest, but man, was it fun.
Yeah, I bet.
It ended up being one of the most memorable arcs of the entire campaign.
That's great.
And it really got me thinking about this whole philosophy of player-driven storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, like it's super popular in D&D and other tabletop RPGs these days.
Yeah, for sure.
And on the surface, it sounds amazing, right? Like, who wouldn't want their ideas to like actually shape the game world?
Yeah.
But how do you make it work in practice? Like without the story going completely off the rails?
You know, it's interesting because this whole trend towards player-driven storytelling
Yeah.
has sparked a lot of debate, particularly among like more experienced dungeon masters.
I bet. Yeah.
Some argue that, giving players too much control, it can lead to campaigns that just become unfocused
Right.
and they lack a coherent narrative.
Makes sense.
And there's this one really vocal critic of this approach,
Oh.
this veteran DM named Dave, who was featured in an article on LitRPG Reads. Have you ever heard of LitRPG Reads?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's by Paul Bellow, and he writes a lot about RPGs. And so anyway, Dave raises some valid concerns about, the potential downsides of like unbridled player freedom.
Yeah.
He argues that it can lead to like tonal inconsistencies, world-breaking requests,
Oh, I see.
and even DM burnout.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, for example, he talks about situations where players demand like overpowered homebrew items,
Right.
or they propose plot twists that just completely contradict the established lore of the game world. And that can create a real headache for the DM.
Oh, yeah.
It forces them to either break their own rules or like constantly say no to their players, which is never fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Kills the vibe for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember reading about those like world-breaking requests in the article. Like,
Yeah.
players wanting weapons that could cleave mountains in two, or demanding to romance a god. Talk about a power trip.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Seems like finding a balance is really key here.
Absolutely. That's where Dave's concept of a filtered sandbox comes
Oh
in.
yeah, a filtered sandbox. I like that.
Yeah, it's all about striking that balance, between player agency and DM control.
Right.
So think of it like this. You have a sandbox, a space where kids can play and be creative, right? But there are still boundaries.
Yeah, of course.
They can't just dig a hole to China or build a skyscraper out of sand.
Right.
And the filtered sandbox approach to RPGs, it's similar. You, as the DM, you provide a framework, a set of rules and limitations.
Okay.
And it's within those boundaries that players can exercise their creativity.
I see.
So it ensures that their choices feel meaningful, but it also keeps the game from going totally off the rails.
Makes sense, yeah.
And, you also avoid breaking the internal logic of your world,
Right.
which is really important.
So the article had some really interesting suggestions for how to actually implement this filtered sandbox idea.
Yeah.
One that stood out to me was the concept of secret player prompts.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah. It's like a sneaky way for the DM to nudge players in a certain direction without them even realizing they're being influenced.
Exactly.
It's pretty clever.
It is. Instead of just like telling players what to do,
Right.
you can kind of subtly plant these seeds. That'll pique their curiosity and guide their decisions.
Mhm.
Like you might drop a note that seems insignificant, but it hints at a larger plot point. Or you could have an NPC casually mention a rumor that aligns with, your intended storyline.
Okay, yeah.
And these prompts can be super effective because
Yeah.
they feel organic,
Right.
Players are making choices based on information they've discovered, but
Mm.
they have no idea that you've carefully placed those breadcrumbs along their path.
It's like you're playing 4D chess with their subconscious. It's brilliant.
It's fun. It can be a lot of fun.
But what about those times when players come up with ideas that are completely out there? Stuff that just doesn't fit into your carefully crafted world at all.
Right.
The article mentioned that even in those situations, there are ways to kind of harness that player creativity without sacrificing your vision for the game.
Absolutely. One technique Dave recommends is what he calls stealing player ideas. Although adapting might be a more accurate term,
Okay.
it's all about taking a player suggestion, even one that seems totally wild,
Right.
and finding a way to weave it into your existing narrative.
Interesting.
It's like taking a raw gemstone and polishing it
Ooh, I like that.
into a beautiful jewel that complements a piece of jewelry. You're not rejecting the player's idea outright, but you're shaping it and
Right.
refining it so that it fits seamlessly into your world.
I love that analogy. It really captures the essence of this technique. And the article had a great example. It was about this player who wanted their character to have a long-lost brother.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Right. And instead of just randomly introducing a brother into the story,
Yeah.
the DM decided to make that brother a spy working for the main villain.
Oh, that's great.
It's perfect.
It's so good. It's a great way to take a player's seemingly unrelated idea
Right.
and turn it into a compelling plot twist.
It adds a layer of personal stakes for that player, too.
Exactly. And that makes them even more invested in the story.
Right. It's a win-win. It really shows that you don't have to choose between player agency and a cohesive narrative. You can have both.
You really can.
But I imagine there are times when a player's idea just doesn't work, no matter how hard you try to adapt it.
Oh, for sure.
Some ideas are just too wild.
Yeah, and there will always be situations where you have to say no to a player's suggestion. Maybe it clashes with your world building, or it unbalances the game mechanics, or it just doesn't fit the tone you're trying to establish.
Right.
But even in those cases, there are ways to handle rejection gracefully. Dave emphasizes, the importance of explaining your reasoning clearly and offering alternative suggestions.
Right.
And if it's appropriate, assuring the player that you might be able to incorporate their idea at a later point in the campaign.
Oh, I love that use it later approach.
Yeah.
Sometimes an idea just isn't right for the current moment in the story. But it could be perfect for a future arc or a side quest. It's like tucking away a treasure map to
Exactly.
be discovered at just the right time.
It adds this element of, delayed gratification to the storytelling.
Right.
Which can actually make the payoff even more satisfying when the time is right. And it also shows the player that you're genuinely listening to them and that you value their contributions, even if you can't implement them right away.
So we've talked a lot about specific techniques for managing player ideas within this filtered sandbox.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture? How do you as a DM foster a collaborative atmosphere where players feel like their contributions genuinely matter, even if their ideas aren't always directly implemented?
That's a great question. And that sense of shared ownership.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crucial to a successful player-driven campaign.
Makes sense.
It's about making players feel like they're not just playing in your world, but that they're co-creating it with you. And that brings us to a key point that Dave raises in the article, the importance of player buy-in. Okay, player buy-in.
Even if you're not implementing every single idea verbatim, you need to make players feel like their contributions are valued
Right.
and that their choices have a tangible impact on the game world.
So it's not just about saying yes to every idea.
No.
It's about fostering a collaborative spirit
Yeah,
where everyone feels heard and respected.
exactly.
That's cool.
And there are a few ways to achieve that. One is to just regularly check in with your players
Okay.
and ask for their feedback on the direction of the campaign. You might ask them, what aspects of the story are you enjoying the most? What are you hoping to see more of?
Yeah.
Are there any elements you'd like to explore further?
Right.
Even if you don't end up incorporating all of their suggestions,
Right.
just the act of listening and acknowledging their thoughts
Yeah.
can go a long way toward making them feel valued
Makes sense.
and invested in that collaborative storytelling process. It shows them that their voices matter.
It creates a dialogue, right? It's not just a one-way street
It's exactly
where the DM dictates everything.
right.
It's a back and forth exchange of ideas. It's about building a shared narrative where everyone feels like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves.
That's a great way to put it.
It's pretty cool.
And there are other techniques you can use to foster that sense of shared ownership. One is to provide the illusion of choice.
Oh, the illusion of choice. Okay.
Essentially, you present players with options that While seemingly diverse,
Mm-hmm.
they all lead back to your intended narrative path.
Interesting.
Imagine like a classic dungeon crawl.
Okay. Yeah.
The players come to a fork in the path. They can choose to go left or right.
Right.
Each path presents different challenges and rewards.
Mm-hmm.
But behind the scenes, you as the DM,
Yeah.
you know that both paths will ultimately converge,
Ooh, sneaky.
leading them to the same climactic encounter.
So it's like a choose-your-own-adventure book where no matter which page you turn to, you're still heading towards the same ending. That's the idea. Players feel like they're making meaningful decisions, that they're shaping their destiny, and they are to a degree.
Right.
But you've subtly guided them towards a predetermined outcome,
Okay.
ensuring that the narrative stays on track while still giving them a sense of agency.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, though.
It is?
How do you give players enough freedom to feel like your choices truly matter without letting the story completely derail?
Well, that's where the real art of DMing comes in. It's about being flexible, adaptable,
Right.
and willing to improvise within the framework you've established.
Okay.
One technique Dave suggests is to preload your campaign
Preload of.
with options that cater to different playstyles and character motivations.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you know you have a player who loves combat,
Yeah.
you might include a side quest that involves battling a powerful monster.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a player who enjoys role-playing and intrigue, you might create a scenario where they need to negotiate a delicate political situation.
Makes sense.
By offering a variety of options
Right.
that all align with your overall plot,
Mm-hmm.
you can give players the freedom to pursue their individual interests without derailing the main narrative.
So you're essentially creating a buffet of choices
Exactly.
that are all aligned with your overall vision for the campaign.
Yes.
Players get to choose what they want to eat,
Mm-hmm.
but you've carefully curated the menu.
That's a great way to put it.
I like that.
It's all about finding that sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
between structure and freedom,
Right.
guidance, and player agency.
Yeah.
And it's a skill that develops with practice and experience.
The article also talked about using NPCs and in-world events to subtly nudge players in a certain direction. Sounds like that takes a lot of finesse.
It does. It's about planting those narrative seeds without being too heavy-handed.
Right.
You know, you might have an NPC drop a cryptic clue
Okay.
or arrange for the players to overhear a conversation that piques their interest.
Yeah.
The key is to make it feel natural. Like it's just a part of the world they're exploring,
Right.
not some forced plot device.
So it's like you're whispering suggestions in their ear
Exactly.
rather than shouting orders through a megaphone.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Players are much more likely to follow a lead if they feel like they discovered it organically
Right.
rather than having it shoved in their face.
It's all about creating the illusion of agency, even if you're subtly guiding them towards your intended outcome.
That's right.
And if all else fails,
Yeah.
you can always pull the alternate ending card right.
Oh, yeah.
The article mentioned having multiple scenarios prepared, each tailored to different player choices,
Right.
but all leading to satisfying conclusions.
Yeah, that's a great technique for ensuring that the story feels complete and impactful, regardless of which path the players choose. You know, it allows you to embrace the unpredictable nature of player-driven storytelling
Right.
without sacrificing the overall narrative structure.
It sounds like a lot of work. It can be.
But also incredibly rewarding
Oh, absolutely.
to be able to create a world that feels so responsive to player actions,
Yeah.
where their choices have real consequences. That must be an amazing feeling as a DM.
It is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's about creating a living, breathing world
Yeah.
that feels dynamic and unpredictable. A world that's shaped by the choices of the players.
Right.
And when it all comes together,
Yeah.
it creates a truly unforgettable gaming experience.
It's like you're not just telling a story. You're collaborating on an epic adventure with a group of friends.
Right.
That's what makes tabletop RPGs so special, right?
Absolutely. It's a shared experience of creativity, imagination, and camaraderie.
Yeah.
And when you embrace the power of player-driven storytelling, you unlock this whole new level of engagement and excitement.
But let's be realistic. Even with the best intentions and all the clever techniques in the world, there will inevitably be times when a player proposes an idea that just doesn't fit your vision for the campaign. Oh, for sure. And as much as we want to encourage player creativity,
Right.
there will be times when we have to say no to an idea, even if it's a good one,
It's got to be the DM's equivalent of a boss battle.
right? It can be.
How do you handle those situations gracefully without crushing a player's enthusiasm?
That's a great question, and one we'll delve into deeper in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the art of saying no constructively, offering alternative suggestions,
Right.
and turning rejection into an opportunity for collaboration.
All right, listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into player-driven storytelling, where we'll explore even more techniques for harnessing the power of your players' ideas without losing control of your game.
So, as we were saying, there are going to be times when a player's idea just doesn't fit into your vision for the campaign. It might clash with the established lore or create an imbalance in the game mechanics, or it just feels tonally out of place.
Yeah, that's tough.
And as much as we want to be supportive of, our players' creativity, sometimes you just have to say no.
That's definitely one of the most challenging things for any DM. You don't want to stifle their creativity, but you also have to protect the integrity of the game world, right?
Right.
The article talked about Dave's rules for saying no gracefully, and one that I thought was super clever
Yeah.
was the idea of diverting the idea into a side quest.
Oh, that's a great way to acknowledge a player's idea without totally derailing the main campaign. You can just say, hey, this is a really cool idea, but it doesn't quite fit into the main plot right now. How about we explore it as a separate side quest?
Right.
Side quests can be a lot of fun.
It can be.
They add depth and richness to the world. And, they give players a chance to really flesh out their characters and explore their backstories.
Plus, it shows the player that you're taking their idea seriously. Even if you can't integrate it directly into the main storyline. And who knows, maybe that side quest will spark a whole new idea that ends up becoming crucial to the main plot later on.
Exactly. Sometimes the most memorable moments in a campaign come from those unexpected detours.
Totally.
It's all part of the magic of tabletop RPGs.
Right. They're living, breathing stories that evolve organically through the collaboration of everyone at the table.
That's what makes them so special.
Yeah, but even when you have to say no to a player's idea, the article emphasized the importance of making them feel like their contributions still matter. It's about creating a sense of shared ownership over the story. Even if their ideas aren't always directly implemented.
Right. And one way to do this is by subtly integrating player ideas into the world itself.
Okay.
Like maybe you name a tavern after a player's character.
I like that.
Or you incorporate a detail from their backstory into the history of a particular location. These small touches can make a big difference.
I bet, yeah.
In making players feel like they're leaving their mark on the world.
I love that it's like those Easter eggs that game developers hide in video games. Little details that reward observant players and make them feel like they're in on a secret.
Exactly. It creates a sense of intimacy and connection. A feeling that this world is truly theirs too.
And the article also suggested regularly checking in with your players, getting their feedback on the direction of the campaign.
Oh, that's so important. Even if you're not implementing every suggestion, just the act of listening and acknowledging their thoughts can go a long way toward making them feel valued and invested in the game.
It's about fostering a collaborative spirit, not a dictatorship.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And who knows, maybe their feedback will spark a new idea that you hadn't even considered. It's a good reminder that even the most experienced DM can benefit from listening to their players.
It's like that old saying, none of us is as smart as all of us.
Exactly. And that collaborative spirit is what makes tabletop RPGs so special. But sometimes, even with the best intentions and all the clever techniques in the world, you're going to encounter a player idea that just doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure.
It might clash with your world building or unbalance the game or just not fit the tone of the campaign. And as much as we want to be inclusive, sometimes you just have to say no.
It sounds like that can be one of the most challenging aspects of being a DM.
It can be, especially if you're worried about upsetting a player or stifling their creativity. That's why it's so important to say no gracefully. And the article offers some really good advice on how to do that.
Like explaining your reasoning clearly.
Yeah.
And offering alternative suggestions. It's about turning that rejection into a constructive conversation.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about saying no to the idea, not to the person. And sometimes the best way to do that is to offer a compromise. Maybe the player's idea for a powerful artifact doesn't quite work in its current form, but you can work together to modify it so that it fits within the world's lore and balance.
Yeah. Or maybe their idea for a massive citywide festival doesn't align with the current storyline. But you could suggest incorporating elements of it into a smaller, more localized event.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that middle ground where everyone feels heard and respected.
Right. And sometimes the best compromise is to just say, let's table this for now and revisit it later.
Yeah.
It gives you time to think about, how you might be able to integrate the idea down the line. And it shows the player that you're not dismissing their suggestion outright.
It's like that use it later trick we talked about earlier. Sometimes the best ideas just need a little time to ferment before they're ready to be unleashed.
Precisely. And that patience can make all the difference in creating a truly collaborative and satisfying RPG experience.
The article also touched on the idea of like testing player ideas before fully committing to them.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's like taking a car for a test drive before you buy it.
Right.
You want to make sure it handles well and meets your needs before you make a big investment. And there are a few ways you can do this in a tabletop RPG.
So, for example, if a player has this elaborate idea for like a secret society that's manipulating events behind the scenes,
Right.
instead of immediately making them a major antagonist,
Yeah.
you might introduce them in a more subtle way.
Exactly. You could have the players uncover a clue that hints at their existence. Or you could arrange a brief encounter with one of their agents. It gives you a chance to gauge the player's reactions and see how the idea plays out in practice
Okay.
before you fully commit to it.
And if it doesn't work out, you haven't invested too much time and energy into it, it's a low-risk way to experiment with new ideas.
Exactly. And if the players are really engaged with the idea, you can always expand on it later, gradually revealing more about the secret society and their machinations.
It's a great way to make the world feel dynamic and responsive to player choices, even if you're ultimately guiding the overall narrative.
Speaking of guiding the narrative, one final technique I want to mention is the idea of framing player choices within the context of your world's established rules and limitations.
Well,
Even when you're giving players a choice,
yeah.
you can still subtly steer them towards outcomes that align with your vision for the game.
So it's not just about giving them a blank slate and saying, do whatever you want.
Right.
It's about providing them with meaningful choices within a defined set of possibilities.
Exactly.
Got it.
Let's say the players are faced with a moral dilemma.
Okay.
Do they side with the rebels fighting against a tyrannical empire? Or do they remain loyal to the established order? As the DM, you can present both options as viable choices, each with its own set of consequences.
Right.
But you can also subtly frame those choices
All right.
within the context of your world's established moral code, its political landscape,
Yeah.
and the overall themes you're exploring in your campaign.
So even when you're giving players a choice,
Yeah.
you're still subtly shaping their perceptions and influencing their decisions.
In a way, yes, but it's not about manipulating them or taking away their agency. It's about ensuring that their choices feel meaningful and impactful within the context of the world that you've created together.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It is.
But when it's done well, it can create a truly immersive and unforgettable RPG experience.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Creating a story that everyone at the table can enjoy and be a part of.
Well said. But before we get too carried away with our grand pronouncements about the nature of storytelling, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Indeed. In the final part of our discussion, we'll explore some concrete examples of how these techniques can be applied in real-world gaming scenarios.
Oh.
And we'll offer some practical advice for DMs who are looking to incorporate player-driven storytelling into their own campaigns.
So we've really gone deep on this idea of player-driven storytelling. We've looked at the benefits, the challenges, and all those different techniques DMs can use to find that balance between letting players go wild and keeping the story on track.
It's been great to explore all those ways to make players feel like their choices really make a difference, while still making sure the game world feels real and the DM's vision for the story shines through.
And if anyone's listening and thinking, whoa, this is a lot to take in, don't sweat it. You don't have to become a player-driven storytelling master overnight.
Yeah, you don't need to change your whole DMing style right away. Start small, Pick one or two of the techniques we've talked about, try them out at your table, see what works for you and your players, and then you can gradually adjust as you get more comfy and confident.
It's like learning anything new. You got to start with the basics and build up from there. You're not going to be a master chef after just one cooking show, right?
Exactly, and just like a chef who's trying out different flavors and ingredients, you as a DM can experiment with different ways to do player-driven storytelling until you find what feels right for you and your group.
So, out of everything we've talked about today, what's the biggest takeaway you hope listeners will grab onto? If you could boil it all down to one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the most important thing to remember is that tabletop RPGs are really all about telling a story together. It's not the DM against the players or about who has the right idea. It's about everyone working together to create something incredible, something everyone at the table can enjoy and be proud of.
That's a great way to put it, and it really speaks to the power of imagination and the magic that happens when people come together to tell a story.
And when you tap into that collaborative energy, when you empower your players and make them feel like their ideas matter, that's when you unlock this whole new level of creativity and excitement in your games.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to say on player-driven storytelling, at least for now. A huge thanks to our expert for sharing all their insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy these deep dives into RPGs and the art of collaborative storytelling.
And of course, we have to give a shout out to LitRPG Reads and Paul Bello for that amazing article about Dave. You know, the grumpy old school DM. If you want to explore more of the world of RPGs and storytelling, definitely check out their work.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to step up their DM game and create truly unforgettable gaming experiences.
And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on player-driven storytelling? Have you had any epic wins or hilarious fails trying to bring your players' ideas to life? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor, and may your adventures be full of laughter, excitement, and the thrill of telling stories together.